A lot of things in restaurants that don't go well are because you're trying to force something that's not organic and natural to happen that just doesn't work. If you're barely making it, your kitchen's barely getting the food out, then any sort of problem becomes a disaster.
Tell me a bit about yourself. How did you start your career in a restaurant? How did you get to Pharmacy Burger? What do you do now? Everything.
So I've been at the Pharmacy Burger coming on 12 years here.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, and started, it was actually my first gig in a restaurant. Was playing in bands at the time and making music, and had been doing stuff in retail and other sort of odd jobs before that. When I had a buddy working at pharmacy, they'd been open a couple years prior to that, and just started hosting the door, to be honest, and wanted to serve eventually. And pharmacy was really well regarded. We had a lot of business. So server positions were also at a premium. So hosted for a while, made a lot of good friends, and really found a home working in the restaurant where I hadn't in other jobs. I had other things I liked or went well or I was good at or whatever, but a restaurant that just had like a life to it that other places I'd worked didn't have, especially retail. And I feel like I hear that somewhat frequently. But did that, and kind of as time passed, excelled there, started to serve. My buddy who got me hired was the lead server there. He left to actually help start a new hospitality company, and to kind of get that rolling. And we didn't have a lead for a while. Eventually, they asked me to kind of take on that role, and did that, which had not just sort of a department head while you're still serving tables, but it involved making some scheduling and doing some other things like that. And so it had some managerial aspects to it. And then as kind of time progressed in that role, we had a really small management team at that time. And so I actually offered, I was like, hey, we were really tense. The managers were working a lot. There were really only two front of house managers. They were working 6 days. One of the days was a double. It was just a lot. And honestly, you could just feel, honestly, this is the point that we were talking about. You could feel the restaurant getting in a worse and worse spot where, from that leadership perspective, and they were great managers, but it was just grueling on them. And especially being a
And
bit.
what years are these?
So this was in 2015 and 16, kind of in that little period there. Um, and they were working a lot. So I basically was like, hey, if you will give me a set of keys, I'll close up shop, or I'll manage a couple shifts, gives you guys some time. And it started out I was going to do a close and then an open, but then we pretty quickly shifted that to two closes, and then I would serve the rest of my week and close in the middle of the week. And so kind of got to dip my toes into managing, and knew the restaurant well enough and was respected by my peers. It is challenging to manage people you work alongside, but it wasn't ever too hard for me because I felt like I was respected by the team enough, and I I've had enough kind of natural leadership or whatever to make that work. It is still challenging where people look at you as either a friend or a coworker, and then now you're telling them what to do or you're having to correct them. It's like you have to figure out how to do that gently, and it's not always straightforward. It's very, and I really realized that as I progressed into full management. It's totally different when you hire someone they've only ever known you as a manager. It really feels very different. But yeah, after doing that for about 8 months, we had a bunch of turnover at the restaurant in leadership. Somebody was moving, another person got promoted, another person, was kind of shimmying along. So we hired in a general manager from outside, and I got promoted to assistant general manager from managing part time, and that was in 2017, and then did that for 5 years. got promoted to take over the beverage program in that first year as well. And that's where I really found a lot of my real enjoyment, because I got to be creative, not just managing by doing that. We sell a lot of beer at the pharmacy, and our beer program, especially like for import beers and weirder beers. So you get to it's a really fun sandbox to like play win. And we were somewhat of a tastemaker in here in Nashville. So things we picked up, they would go from nowhere to you'd see them across the city, which is just a fun thing. So. So yeah, that was kind of it. And then, about 3 years ago, the GM at the time, actually that almost 4 years ago now, he moved on and went on to do new things. Right around that same time, we had opened our second location at the Assembly Food Hall. So we have a brick and mortar full service restaurant in East Nashville, where you have a QSR style in the Assembly Food Hall that had just opened when he moved on. I got promoted up to GM. And then the next year, the owner asked me to run all our locations, which about 6 months from then, we opened our a spot at the airport as well. So we're the 3 locations now, like QSR in the downtown full service East Nashville, which is the flagship original, and then a brand expansion in the airport, which is it's a licensed location, so it's something it's very unique where it's not very hands-on, but we oversee all the menu direction. We oversee all making sure they're representing our brand correctly. So it's actually a very different process than what we normally do, but it's also still really important to manage it. But it's just different. There's not hiring. You're not tracking costs. You're not doing all that stuff. You're just making sure they're representing the company correctly. So, but we have great partners in that space. And airports are such specialized locations that it depends on the kind of company you are. But I would recommend this for a lot of people, but it's all about finding the right partner to represent your brand in those spaces.
So what's your everyday job looks like? What do you do like the first thing in the morning?
Yeah, so like you get up, like a lot of people, I check my phone. That's going to be whether that's checking social media and goofing off a little bit, or whether that's checking your email and getting going. What my day looks like has changed a lot over the years. Now being the director of operations of multiple locations, you still have to be hands-on. You still have to see things for yourself, but at the same time, it's more about making sure your leaders are in place doing the things that need to be done, making sure you're hitting those key sales metrics. And so I always looked at it as tiers where your employees are managing the guests and making sure the guests are satisfied. Your managers are managing the employees, and they're making sure the employees are set up to do their jobs correctly, and then also that they are doing that job, both set up and then actually held accountable to doing it. And then I'm at that next layer, managing the leadership, making sure they're set up to lead, develop, operate systems that allow our employees to thrive. And then the owner, I guess, does that for me. So, yeah.
Okay, that's a lot. So usually people don't even think of career in hospitality as a career. They think of it like a gig for maybe 2 years or something. Yeah. And they don't think that you can actually build this career from server to general manager to manager of operations and stuff. So do you think your career path is unique, or it's actually something that can be achieved, just people don't go there usually?
So I don't want to have a non-answer, but it's sort of both, because it depends on where you're at. Where we have a lot of employees. So across my 2 locations that I manage directly, we have 100 employees, give or take, at any one point in time. With a large outdoor space, we bulk up, and with Nashville having a lot of tourism business, we bulk up during the summer, and then it restricts down during the winter. But about 100 employees, give or take. So all of my employees are probably not going to move up. Obviously, most of them are not going to do that. A lot of them are, even if they're going to be a server for a long time, even if they're going to be a bartender for a very long time. A lot of them are going to find that home and do that just for my people. But there are those we work with, and we've promoted several, where a lot of people have found direct hands-on service has a shelf life for them. There's just a point where dealing with customers, there's just a point where it's like at a certain point we're like, man, I just can't do this anymore. I'm having a really hard time just going to that well of doing that day in and day out. And also, you can kind of get to where like you've solved the customer interaction, where you feel like I've figured out exactly how to take care of guests and do that. And yes, this is a way to make money for me, but I know for myself, once I've solved something, it becomes a lot less interesting. And it's just, it's hard to enjoy it. It's hard to kind of relax into it. And I found that even in management, once I really figured out, oh, this is how to do the beverage program. Luckily, some things have so many different iterations that you can kind of take on new challenges naturally, and management is like that. But as far as like shift managing, there comes a point where like dealing with a call out, or dealing with, whether we're short staffed or we're busy or we're slow, like there's so many just normal things you deal with. And once you've kind of solved those issues, which also when you've solved them, you usually also make the problems go away, because when you're doing your job right, there are things you can't plan for, which are freak things. But even then, if you're cleaning and maintaining your equipment, guess what? You're just not going to have a lot of equipment break. When you're not doing that, your work gets more exciting because equipment breaks. It's not fun excitement. It's not good, but it is fun. But when you keep things clean and organized, you place your orders. You're never like, oh, we're running out of this thing because no, we're not doing our jobs. The better you do your job, the more boring things get in some ways. So, like that being said, you have to then take on challenges, which new things in restaurants are always hard, because I think restaurants are always about habits, and it takes, they say, 21 days or 2 months, depending on who you talk to, that takes to make a habit. So if you change a menu and you introduce a new menu item, those first somewhere between 3 weeks to 2 months are just gonna feel weird. There's no way around it. There's no amount of planning that's gonna make it not feel weird. It's just gonna be different and weird. Now, planning and thoughtfulness can make it a lot smoother, obviously. So it's always worthwhile to do that. But I've really learned, and I'm not even sure I'm answering your question at this point. But
no, that's actually
okay.
Really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. But one of the biggest things I've learned in doing this is that you just have to relax and respond to what's going on. So much of it is like, a lot of things in restaurants that don't go well are because you're trying to force something that's not organic and natural to happen, that just doesn't work. And the way I think of it too is like, they preference paths, especially college campuses are a great example, where they'll pave straight lines everywhere, and then they just like, the kids will walk wherever they want, and then you'll see the carbs out. That's what a restaurant is. Obviously, sometimes you have to put guardrails because, like, nope, even though this is less efficient, this is the way we have to do that. And sometimes you have to lay a marker down. But you also have to realize anytime you do that, you're creating friction that you will have to really maintain. And you need to have a really, really strong culture if you're going to try to, like, keep that friction, because you want to use a special silverware or do some sort of special decoration or some point of service that or something in your food that's really important. You're gonna have to really invest in that, and have a lot of like social capital with your team to make sure that comes across correctly. But the flip side is, you introduce something, you need to be thoughtful, make sure you have the materials set up in space. But then a lot of times the best way to deal with it is to just then do it, be very involved in the process of whatever you're doing, whether that's reorganizing your tables, and then let the workflow show itself, respond to problems, make things smoother. But like and this is where like there's such a huge advantage to being at a mom and pop in this regard. And there's a lot of advantages to being in a large company where there's access to resources and procedures and a history and all these things. But when you get that top-down corporate structure, you get someone telling you to do something that then, unless your stores are all cookie cutter, where they can say, well, like a McDonald's, like, okay, they know where the fryer and the grill is, so they at every store, so then they know they can tell you exactly what to do and all these processes. But once you've got things that are a little more like laid out organically, you need someone in that space helping you figure out what's the best way to actually do this, especially if you're dealing with volume. If you've got lots of orders to deal with, you need to just respond to, okay, how many of these are we getting? Okay, well, we're going to have to deal with 60 chickens. So then we need this much grill space. We need to be thinking about, this is when these happen at this time and responding to those things organically. When you top down it at the beginning, you're just probably going to cause additional problems and not make it smoother. So you've always got to judge, am I causing a problem? And is that problem important because I want candles lit on the table? Because like there's all sorts of little things that can be very nice for the guest. But again, okay, what's that cost benefit all the time my servers are spending doing that instead of filling someone's water? Again, sometimes it's worth it. Sometimes it actually makes an experience. And then sometimes you're like, actually, we're folding napkins and we're wasting a whole bunch of time doing this, and like nobody cares, and we're not getting any value out of it. So you gotta respond to those things. And again, the wonderful thing about a mom and pop, which we are, which makes it sound small, we're a larger company now, but we're able to do whatever we want. We can just make sure we're taking care of the guest. We can respond to our employees and hear them. And when you're in that one, a really important thing is to talk to and listen to your employees. You're going to weed out a lot of just complaining, because there's some people that like are going to be mad no matter what you ask them to do. And that's just probably not helpful. You can just discard it. I will say listening to them and saying, I'm really sorry that, that's important, but it's not valuable. But you'll usually find you have a few key team players who actually are thoughtful about what they're doing. And their feedback's really important. Hey, this dish, when it comes out, it's always looking like this, or I'm having this problem. And they actually, and again, if it's not adding value to the experience, then just get rid of it. Find a way to get around it. There's probably not a good reason to do it.
So the TV stereotype of restaurant kitchen, where it's chaos every day, a lot like the Bear TV show,
Yeah.
It's not what a good restaurant looks like, right?
No.
It's not what a good general manager should have in
not.
mind.
No, I will say I watched The Bear in that first season. I had a really hard time getting through that specific episode where they're in the weeds with all the to-go orders, because that is what a bad shift feels like. I had to tell people in my whole life, like, yeah, and we've been a part of them. There's nights where, again, a fryer goes down or something happens, you get a bunch of orders, something's chaos. It's like, and yeah, that's that horrible feeling is what it's like. But if you're having that feeling all the time, it's just because something's wrong. It should not be. That should be one day a year where you're like, whoa, this is, and not even, and honestly, ideally less than that. But again, it's life. Things are going to happen. Somebody drops a tray of food or whatever. But again, we talk about that at the restaurant a lot. You want to have some built-in cushion to where if someone does drop a tray of food, it's not ruining the shift. Because again, if you're barely making it, your kitchen's barely getting the food out, then any sort of problem becomes a disaster. Instead of just being, oh, let's fix this and move on. So you want to make sure you've got that headroom. But yeah, no, if things are, I'd say this to my servers too. It's like, if this is really stressful to you, and if you're having a hard time in a shift, and like you're in the weeds, which is what we say in the business, if you're in the weeds all the time, regularly, every shift, or even multiple times a week, beyond, and again, you have to have some self-awareness. Sometimes you just feeling a little stress is not the same as truly being in the weeds, where you're really behind and struggling to give good service. But if you feel that way, it's because you're not doing your job correctly. It's because you're not being organized enough, or we talk about this a lot, doing things, and this applies to management too, doing things when you have time to do them instead of waiting until you have to do them. So like for a manager, it's getting a schedule out as soon as possible, or at the earliest availability, placing your orders ahead of time, not waiting till all orders have to get in at 3 p.m. and doing it at 2. Place it as soon as you've got the information to place the order for what you need. Just place it, again, because you don't know what's going to happen in an hour. It's the same thing with servers. If you've got side work to do, whether it's taking out the trash or filling an ice bucket or restocking your cups, you should do it whenever, whether it's even like, it's not empty or the trash is half full, but I have a moment. So many people make their job harder because they're just not engaged with what they're doing. And they're not like, this ice bucket needs to be, I could get a bucket of ice right now, so I'm just going to go do that. And they want to either go have a cigarette, or they want to get on their phone and they want to goof off, or whatever it is. and they want to chit chat with a coworker. Which again, I love camaraderie. Our staff are all very friendly with each other, and having that sort of environment is really important to us. But I always tell people too, just do it together and just talk while you do the thing, which is totally fine. Like you guys, like I really have enjoyed over my years working with someone, and you talk and you enjoy it. But again, like do it while you do the thing. Don't let it get in
But
the.
how do you establish that kind of culture in the team?
Well, that's easier said than done for sure. And it it takes it that one takes time. But like to me, like every organization is its own like has a personality, has like a way of being, and like basically, the way us as humans, we are cells and blood and all organs and all working together. Organizations are the exact same way. And they get sick in the same way that bodies get sick, and they have issues in the same way bodies get sick. So your leadership is like the brain. It's not the most important part, but it's a very important part. And it's to tell things what to do to keep it organized. So again, if you've got bad plans, bad thoughts, because you've got bad leadership, you're going to be disorganized and have a problem. And like we know with people, if you've got a bad headspace, it's hard for anything to go well, which is why it's hard to thrive with bad leadership. That being said, it is possible, but it's really, really hard. Similarly, you need, and I can get off this body metaphor a little bit here, but to develop good culture, it does start with that, being thoughtful about what you're doing, responding to problems correctly, and being aware that they're happening in the first place, which can be a huge issue with just leadership not paying attention to what's going on a lot of times. But or having a system where people feel the need to hide problems instead of share them, because if you're that can happen a lot, especially with your like middle tier of management. Everybody wants to hang on to their problems and not talk about them. So you need a culture where people aren't punished for revealing bad things. Obviously, sometimes that has to be a part of it, but like just the revealing of an issue, a lot of times, especially sometimes in more corporate structures, giving someone else a problem is seen as a failure. But a lot of times the person down here really doesn't have the ability to solve the problem. So and again, most things don't go away if you just pretend they're gone. So, or don't exist. So you've got to run up the chain. But again, then you need leadership as things go up, have to both, if there is an issue, they've got to hold the people that made that cause these issues responsible, and then correct those issues so they don't happen again. And then again, these are all these things that get that. But that process that I just described is also how you get culture. So a lot of it is about accountability, about both your leadership and your staff. And so, but then culture is really defined by what matters to you. If it matters to you that your guests really enjoy themselves, and then you hold your staff accountable to that, which sounds like discipline all the time. It's not really just discipline. It's also incentivizing and encouraging, and then making that really your goal. But if that's your goal, which is sort of a baseline bare minimum maybe in some ways, it will matter from there. Again, a lot of businesses, though, goals that the guest satisfaction is ancillary to making money. Maybe making money is the most important thing. And again, there's things you're going to do when you do that. You're going to, not cut corners in terms of shirking, because sometimes that's actually a really bad idea, but you're just going to find ways to be efficient in the best way possible. Similarly, some places just care about having the best food. The service is all it's like a side point to just giving people great food, because maybe I'm a chef and that's all I really care about is giving people food in a certain way. Or there's maybe a most important thing, or there's a layering of those things. But you find the things you care about at those like baseline minimums, and then you build it backwards from there, and you make sure you're upholding those values. A big part of culture, though, similarly, and this is where the body metaphor comes in. Not every person, whether in leadership or as an employee, is going to be a fit for your restaurant, even if they're a fit somewhere else. And so
That's what I was going to ask. Like, how do you hire these people that are going to fit your?
Yeah,
in
so
your
for us,
picture?
it's
Yeah.
making sure to have interviews and to have standards. Don't just hire anybody because they have a pulse. Obviously, if you're in a bad spot with hiring, sometimes you have to do that, and then you try to develop them. I will say, especially in the restaurant space, you can do that with people that don't have a lot of experience. If they don't have a lot, even if you don't, maybe they're, it's not the perfect situation. If they've got, a certain level of intelligence and they're like, you can tell they're like aware and they've got a certain charisma and people skills. If it's for a front of house position, you can probably build in, some good working habits and some process if you have a good process for your restaurant. And similarly for kitchen, if they've got an attention to detail and a good work ethic, you can kind of build in that. You can. It also depends on what how sophisticated. Are you a line cook? Are they working a fry station? Because then you need someone that can just do your process, follow orders, stay attentive, and work hard. Obviously, in a more advanced kitchen, if they're making sauces and they're doing advanced cooking techniques, then you're either going to need to spend a lot of time training them, or you're going to need someone with more experience. But those things are all really important to know. Like, and you're going to know that about your organization, or you should. But for us, we're doing burgers and brats. There are things that are more sophisticated about what we're doing. I think our food is excellent, but flipping a burger and doing some of these things aren't the most challenging. What's challenging is the volume we're doing it, and we have a very small kitchen. So like, you need someone that's really, invested and involved and hardworking, and has a certain level of can think through a lot of different things, where can look at 10 tickets and figure out the best way to get through those, little like some problem solving, puzzle solving ability there. But hiring is a lot about like listening to your gut, and also making sure you know how to listen to your gut and feel people, and like, is this the right vibe? And again, vibe for my restaurant, not vibe like I would like to hang out with this person or whatever it is, obviously. So, but do they feel like an employee here? Can I imagine them fitting in with my staff? You obviously don't want to go too far with that, because you can become really insular if you think about that too much. But still, can they represent my brand? Do they fit in? Am I really confident that with the level of training that we're able to give, that they'll be able to fulfill the duties we're going to ask of them? That's it. And then the big thing is I think when you hire someone and it's very obvious that it's not working, and at the very beginning, it's just really best to move on pretty quickly. Sometimes it's just very
Pretty
apparent.
quickly is how many
Yeah, it's
days,
like,
weeks,
and again,
months?
yeah, exactly. And for us, it's in that first couple weeks, especially. It's like, if there's a big red flag, this just probably isn't a good fit. And a lot of times people will have a 30 days or a 60-day, like, almost trial window, where we're going to have a review at the end of that. And that's a great way to catch that, if you actually can be a stickler with that.
And
But
what would a red flag look like?
it could be a lot of different things. And again, I really believe in grace and mistakes, and people are more likely to make mistakes at the beginning. So like, messing up an order, if they're showing improvement and acknowledging it, that's not a big deal to me. Also, and when you hire a new employee, it's also very likely that there might be a miscommunication about scheduling to begin with. So it's possible to have a shift mix up, but that's where you want to use discernment, where if it's their first shift, or maybe they couldn't start for 2 weeks and they're coming back, it's very likely there'll be it's possible that there's some confusion there. And that's where you've got to know, oh, okay, this was a mix up, and that's understandable. If someone just like doesn't show up for a shift out of nowhere, and you're like, but this is your first week, what's going on? Or is late, and it's like it's not 5 minutes late, and they're like, I'm so sorry, I'm getting used to the traffic. And it's like, again, it's like, you also have to know, am I getting an excuse that actually makes any sense? And as a human, I can tell, okay. And then again, if it is like, oh, I'm so sorry, I was 12 minutes late, and again, not everybody leaves the 30 minutes early because it's at their new job, which would be nice, but not everybody does that. Okay. And then if that problem goes away, then that's a pretty good sign that yes, they were just getting used to what's going on, and that's fine. And not the end of the world, at least in my book. But then again, if it's like, oh, they're late, it's their first 4 shifts, they're late 15 minutes every day. Again, I'm not sure that's at that point we're going to have a really serious talk about, hey, you're just getting started. This is happening. This has got to stop now, or this isn't going to work. Then the other one though is just sometimes you hire someone, they had a really great interview, and then they don't fit with the staff at all, and they're being really strange. And again, it's like, and we get into and I hate to phrase it that generally, but like, it's hard to give examples because I've had this happen without it, the examples end up being really crass and strange usually, but you get behavior that doesn't make any sense. And again, people in restaurants, people make jokes of all sorts of all sorts. A lot of them risque to some degree, but they usually do it with people they're comfortable with and they understand that those jokes are going to be received well. If someone like shows up at your restaurant and is like guns a-blazing saying things that are weird with people they don't know, that's often a really good sign. Oh man, this is not right. And also you usually get your best foot forward with someone in that first window where they're definitely in an interview, and then definitely in that first little bit. If you're not getting that best foot forward, or their best foot forward really looks bad, again, it's just like, we made a mistake. Let's just move on. It's just best, because again, it's the sunk cost fallacy. Doubling down on a mistake you made just to like, this was a bad decision. It's like, all it does is make things worse. But again, we're not obligated to hire everyone. We want to be fair and do a review process. But again, in that really tight window, you just want to be really careful. Beyond that, really believe in a lot of grace. Once someone's worked with you for 6 months, a year, 2 years, especially longer than that, those people are really valuable, especially if they've
How
done
do you
it
make sure that people who fit actually stay with you longer? Because
Yeah,
everyone says that
a hard thing.
retention is not great
Well,
in
and
restaurants.
we still have a good amount of turnover because of the industry we're in. Although thankfully, it's a lot of time it's a younger person who's now going back to college or finally got a job in their field that they wanted to be in, or just people moving. Things happen in life. That being said, we also have a lot of employees that have been with us for years and years and years and years. We also have a lot of employees that are with us, leave, and then come back for whatever reason. And that's something I'm really proud of. The way you do that is by caring for people. And so like, it starts, one, if you're going to lose people if your restaurant is slow. Let's talk about servers. You're going to lose servers if they don't have tables to wait. That's just it. Number one, you have to have tables for them to wait, or the correct amount. If you've got enough tables for one server, you should have one server. And then again, if you keep scheduling 2 servers when you need one, you will lose one of them. You will lose one, and probably you'll lose the good one. To be honest, that's the thing people don't realize, is the good one has the ability to get another job, and you'll be stuck with your less good server. So you want to watch that. And again, if you're in a market where you're doing your tip credit and I can schedule servers and it doesn't matter, it should matter to you that your servers are enjoying their work and making adequate money, meeting their needs, because otherwise, and obviously there's a human level where we should care about that, but for your business, you should care about that, because again, they will leave if they are not making money. Now, again, we have to find the balance of workload and how many tables can they actually successfully wait. You gotta do all that. But if you're in a slower space, you need to schedule to where it works out, again, or you will just constantly rotate. 2, you should not require a bunch of extra work on people that is meaningless. Like, you should find the requirements that are actually needed to do the job, and then truly uphold those. And your staff will respect you because you uphold those standards, and they will also respect you for not making them do a bunch of things that are meaningless. So, well, that's a great example, but or that's a great question. I mean, but the kind of thing that comes to mind is like rolling silverware, which is actually it is important, but it's that sort of thing that like, as long as we can find a better way to do it, some places need it done, but there are. See, the thing is, I don't have a lot of examples because we really try not to do those things. So I don't have a good one. And again, that's not to say you do that, but like, it's not to say that all of these things don't count. But like, I would say reducing them to not literally be as little as possible, but to be what actually makes sense for each job, and so that the load is relatively fair and evenly distributed. Those things are all really important. People are going to be often not wanting to be at work, no matter how good your culture is, and no matter how it is. So making work fun is really important as well. So again, I think it's really important you've got to hold people accountable, but people really don't like being scolded in the moment. And it's also not a good way to get good behavior from people for the most part. So like communicating with people, which usually involves doing an intentional sit down and saying, hey, this is what we're needing from you. This is what we're looking for. This has not met the mark. You'll usually get a better response from people. But then I've been managed this way too, where like something happens and then you get snapped at or chided, and it's just negative. And again, especially if we're talking about servers or in the kitchen, you're getting chided and you're building a ticket and you're focusing, and especially if you're busy, it's really hard then now you're emotional. I've been scolded, even if it's totally justified. Well, now I can't do my job right. Again, there are exceptions to this when a safety issue is involved, or there's a huge mistake that you've just got to correct. But again, keeping that environment as positive as possible while you correct the issue is really important, because again, in the front of house, they're dealing with guests. Like, you literally can't have servers crying and being angry. Like, you just can't have it. Or if they do, they've got to be removed from the floor. So doing things in the middle of service is just a huge mistake. And if you've got a manager who's barking at people or being really negative. Again, we talked about the bear. They do that in the bear. There are places that give good food and good service that have these really intense cultures, and you can do that if you want to do we are excellent, and that's our whole MO is like, we never mess up and we're going to be really strict, and people can get bought into that, especially if you're a place with a really good reputation. Again, finding a balance between that, like the negativity is also like, I feel like it's performance theater. I'm like, we take ourselves so seriously. You can actually hold people to a standard without cursing at them and yelling at them and calling them names. You really don't have to do it. So those are those things where when you're culture building and getting people to work, you just like need to care about them. But you also, caring about them does not mean doing whatever they want all the time. It means having standards, having a culture that you uphold, and then as much as you can, always doing that fairly. Because again, if you aren't, you will always have in your kitchen and in your front of house, you will always have higher performing people that get more done. They wait more tables. They do more side work than the rest of the team. And they do it just naturally because they just have a high level of energy and they're smart. You want to not coddle them and do whatever those people want, but you have to uphold standards on your team that struggle, because so that they don't feel taken advantage of. But you also have to help them see and realize that there's no world where you get the same, or it's very unlikely that you get the same level of performance. You just need to make sure it's as close as possible to where they don't feel taken advantage of. Because again, in a culture where you coddle let's just say that your slower people or your people that don't do as great a job because you're trying to just keep things around, you will just lose your high performers. If you don't make sure that they do that, which is why a lot of times tip shares for servers don't work out, because again, the people that feel like they're doing the most do that. Again, unless you have ways to reward them. They can work, again, if you have the right culture and the right structure. And we don't use a tip share like that. We do use a tip out system, but for our support staff and bar and all that stuff. But they can work depending on, again, they work in counter service environments really well for that exact reason, because everybody's really sharing and making it happen more directly. But that's why when you're building all your structure, a lot of people want to do the tip share for that reason. But if you do that, a big part of your job will be really policing how fair everything is. And the server that waited on 6-8 tops and a bunch of giant parties and sold a ton of beer is going to feel, if that happens regularly, they're going to feel aggrieved when Johnny had a bunch of two tops and also was on his phone all night. Like and we made the same money. It's just that's gonna drive them nuts. So yeah, I don't.
About tips, what do you think about the whole tipping culture controversy that's going on for several years now, I think?
Yeah. So I was a tipped employee for a long time, and our staff is tipped. I definitely have mixed feelings on it at times. It can be a really negative experience when you don't know what you're gonna make, and when you get someone under tips or doesn't tip at all. It's really negative. I will say for me, I enjoyed being tipped because it was like cool to have direct feedback on your work, and typically speaking, you actually do really well. So like if you're in there, like, but obviously this all depends because again, if you're in a slow restaurant, you end up waiting on 4, 5, 6 tables throughout a shift. You're gonna have a bad shift, and that can happen in a moment where it's bad. So like, that's the dichotomy to me, where that worker then doesn't get compensated, or again, the fluctuations of it are really hard. We have a relatively stable level of business, and we try to manage it in such a way to where we feel really confident our staff's going to do well at any given day. So on that end, I like it. It's nice. People can do well doing that. Again, if there's a different world where we bake all those things into the price and everything, that could work. But I do feel like there's something uniquely American about it in a way that I kind of enjoy, maybe, even though it is quirky. So again, like I said, I have mixed feelings. I don't mind tipping when I go out to eat, of course, and it's not a negative. It's not a negative for me in that way. So like but it also like it's like asking a duck about water or whatever, where like it's just, I don't know, it's just how it's always been. So I don't know. And I've traveled to Europe a few times where tipping is less common, and that's fine too. So so again, I kind of go both ways with it. So
The tax on tips initiative, is that going to help at all, or not?
that's a good question, and I've read about it a little bit, and I've thought about it a little bit. It would be a huge benefit to our wait staff and our server staff. And honestly, we've thought about what would there be anything for us to do or to adjust to? And honestly, I don't know. I'll have to look at it again, especially if it looks like it's actually going to happen or not. I can see an argument for both, where a tip is a gift in some ways. You can argue, so like, okay, it shouldn't be taxed, even though we do tax large gifts large enough in other areas. But also at the same time, taxes are also clearly a wage, and actually, if like again, we do tips on our payroll as well. We collect them for the credit card tips, collect them at the end of the week, and then distribute them on payroll. So like, but I can see that things are very stable for us and our staff. Obviously, like individuals fluctuate based on a little bit based on their schedules. But generally speaking, things for us are very stable. And they do go up and down with our sales, but the overall numbers, there's lots of trends to them. So I get why that would be just considered a wage, because of the way the system works. So like, again, I know I'm giving you kind of a nothing answer here, but like I sort of get both sides. But hey, I mean, if we can do without the taxes and it's not going to cause a problem, then hey, that's fine with me, I guess.